Session-6, Sustainability, Trust and Market Integrity. The session will be chaired by John Mulligan, who is the Head of Sustainability Strategy at the World Gold Council. John Mulligan leads the Council's work on responsible gold, climate and sustainability, engaging with industry, investors and policymakers to strengthen trust in gold and its role in transitioning global economy. He focuses on how robust standards, transparency and data can underpin gold's contribution to sustainable finance and development. Joining him in conversation is Ms. Doris, Advisor LBMA, and Mr. Urs Roosli, CEO aXedras. As I invite him, I'll give a short introduction. I request you to wait as we change over. And then we have Mr. Ben Kirkwood, Head of ESG at ABC Refinery. A brief introduction about each one of our speakers. Ms. Doris advises LBMA on key policy and market initiatives with a particular focus on responsible sourcing standards and regulatory engagement. Her work supports the continual enhancement of LBMA good delivery and responsible supply chain framework, helping align global bullion markets with evolving ESG expectations. Mr. Ben Kirkwood leads ESG strategy at ABC Refinery, overseeing environmental, social, and governance practices across its refining and related operations. He works on embedding responsible sourcing, decarbonization efforts, and community considerations into refineries' business, reflecting growing stakeholders' expectations around sustainable precious metals. Mr. Urs Roosli is a regular speaker at APPMC. He is the CEO of aXedras, a technology company focused on digital solutions for precious metals value chain. He specializes in deploying secure, data-driven platforms that enhances traceability, transparency, and trust from mine to market, supporting efforts to strengthen market integrity and compliance. With this, and a round of applause, I welcome the moderator as well as all the three excellent speakers to the session. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. So first of all, I'd like to add my thanks and gratitude to Albert, KL, Margaret, Batsa, and the whole team. It's great to be here again. It's a conference which is becoming quite a substantial part, I think, of the precious metal calendar in the world. I'd also like to thank, obviously, my co-panelists, Doris, Ben Kirkwood, and Urs Roosli. You will hear from them in a second, but first of all, I'd just like to set the scene, if you will. And I think I'm going to make a claim that this is probably the most important session of the whole conference. And the reason why I'm going to make that claim is it's the one with trust in the title. And so if we look back to yesterday, you will have heard the Deputy Prime Minister say that the market is underpinned by trust and resilience. You will have heard my boss, David Tate, say that trust is fundamental regardless of the developments in infrastructure and future initiatives. You'll have heard Ruth Crowell from the LBMA say that consistency and standards are a key solution to fragmentation, and that is key to building trust. In fact, I think I sat through most sessions yesterday, and I don't think a single session did not mention trust as fundamental to the whole market. We're fortunate because the three panelists represent different aspects of that building of trust. We have Doris representing a key standard setter in terms of defining performance standards and specifically responsible sourcing. We have a key refiner talking about how to implement and operationalize standards of responsible sourcing at the refinery level. And then we have a key provider of solutions for digital traceability and digital infrastructure. So I mentioned trust in the title. I am going to slightly qualify the title in the sense that the term sustainability is used, and I think we just need to differentiate between responsible sourcing, responsibility as foundational, and then what we mean by sustainability, because actually here we're talking about responsibility and responsible sourcing. That said, one is built on the other. And I think too often when we talk certainly about sustainability, we often discuss it as if it's a moral aspiration, or on the other side, a compliance burden. And I think in reality, for the precious metals market in particular, it is increasingly something that is actually concrete, something that is fundamental, because the market needs to be able to demonstrate integrity. It needs to earn trust in a very demonstrable way, and it needs to be able to function efficiently in a world where it is being given more and more scrutiny. And so those are the things we'll be talking about today. I'd like to orientate our conversation, and when I ask my panelists to comment, I'd like them to think about three linked questions, if you will. One is, what does credible responsibility look like in practice across the whole gold value chain? One is, how does better transparent sourcing and due diligence strengthen trust? And one is actually, what role can Asia play, given where we're sitting today, what role can Asia play in shaping the future development, the next phase, if you will, of responsible sourcing and market integrity? So those are the three questions that I hope we will at least partially answer as we shape this discussion. Now, before we have a conversation, I think a few of the panelists would like to say a few opening words. So I'm going to come to you first, Urs, and if you would like to just have some opening comments before we get started.
Thank you very much, John. aXedras, we are a digital solution provider for increasing the transparency on the data on the product level. It's all about know your asset. We do a lot about know your client, but we do very little about know your asset. What we have developed is a global product platform which covers the entire value chain from the supplier, can be a mine, to the refiner, to the investor. So with the target that data can be cached at the origin part and can be used by the refinery to apply to each and individual product. So that digital twin from each individual product can then be verified by the investor whenever they invest into the material. Means modern technology can increase the trust of the individual asset, and that can be supported along the value chain so that we can reuse the work already done by the other party, and we don't have to do the work again from scratch when you get to the material itself. So increasing trust means to have data which are verifiable by the individual party, and modern technology can definitely help here to support that.
Thank you. Ben, do you want to say a few opening words before we start our chat?
Yeah, thank you. So at ABC Refinery, I think it's pretty safe to say that credibility, trust and regional impact are three major areas that we strive to achieve and really push for. So I'm glad that we're here talking about this, like credible responsibilities, credible sustainability in your sourcing is quite poignant, and that involves things like ensuring that you're investigating your supply very, very thoroughly, you're documenting it incredibly well, and doing it all in a very auditable way. Similarly, that's critical for then strengthening that trust from a customer perspective, because without that auditability, without that transparency, your customers are going to question exactly where that information comes from, how that's stored, and really that whole data area. And then moving on to the regional impact, how does that, how are we getting involved from an Asia perspective? I think we're really well placed. We're going to talk soon about innovative technology and how that really strengthens the credibility of the KYC and all of the areas associated with responsible sourcing. But it comes down to the sharing of information, and I think Asia is well placed in developing new tools and adopting them and using that as a pilot scale to then roll out around the world. So, yeah, thank you for having us.
Thanks. I think you tried to answer all questions in one then, so thank you. Doris, the kind of one of the foundations of responsible sourcing as a key reference point is the LBMA's Responsible Gold Guidance. And I think the Responsible Gold Guidance V10 consultation has just recently opened. What are the material changes in version 10 that are coming down the line?
Sure, John, thank you. First of all, let me just introduce LBMA a little bit more. LBMA is an independent authority. We have members. We voice out for our members, and we also monitor our members and good delivery refineries. And so that helps the market to understand the transparency. So regarding your question, in principle, LBMA's Responsible Sourcing Guidance version 10, RGG 10, is built up on the feedback on RGG 9. On one side, it provides more clarity and definition to existing requirements. And on the other side, it does require the refineries to do the enhanced due diligence on some certain aspects. And I would like to highlight 4 major changes, which I think most close to Asian market. That is secondary bar, investment bar, and SM formalization, and more strengthened ESG requirements. Let me explain one by one. First, the secondary bar is a new name to replace recycled bars. Under secondary bars, there are 3 subcategories: unprocessed gold, melted gold, and industrial byproducts. And each of them has its own minimum provenance requirements. For example, melted gold has to be traced back to the source country of the feedstock source instead of the last supplier. So it helps the market to understand the transparency. Second is the investment gold. It's a new brand name. It actually separated from the recycled gold. It has its own minimum requirements according to the source. Third is the new requirements on the artisanal small-scale mines. And short name is SM. SM toolkit is just a reference in RGG 9. In RGG 10, it will be formally included as part of the guidance. To be eligible as the material source, the small artisanal small mines, it has to come from the registered legal licensed operation or a well-recognized scheme or central bank or government initiatives. So it is an improvement to understand the source of small mine as gold from small mines. The last one is the stronger ESG requirements. And the ESG now is expanded from legal compliance from raw material, but also to the second material. And biodiversity now explicitly cover the land change use, deforestation, and endangered species. And also the climate change and the tailing facilities are also included. And for the assurance, the standard has moved from ISAE 3000 to ISSA 5000. And the reporting requirement also has been required more information from the good delivery refineries. Starting from 2026, it will require the refiners to submit their mining partner data, that is the World Gold Council miners data, and also the country of origin data through the GBI system. So in summary, RGG 10 will include 2 new names: investment gold, secondary gold, and also SM formalization, and the stronger ESG and transparent requirements. Now RGG 10 is on public consultation until July 10 next week. So welcome the good delivery refineries and non-good delivery refineries and the market participants to submit your feedback through the 2 LBMA responsible sourcing team through the email rgg@lbma.org.uk. Thank you, John.
Thank you, and I think it's quite important that participants, market participants get involved in that consultation, because it's quite a significant expansion, I think, of what we expect. And I did say we're focusing primarily on responsible sourcing, but with those ESG components, you are now looking at broader sustainability impacts too. Ben, refineries are always at the key pressure point in some ways, the intermediary in the market. And I just wonder, when you consider that both current expectations, current obligations from an RGG perspective or a compliance perspective, what is the key aspects you take from that to say, okay, this is contributing to trust from refiners' perspective? How do you look at operationalizing some of the stuff that Doris has mentioned, and looking forward, what might that mean for you as a refiner, implementing guidance?
So I think a critical component of that is, again, going back to providing infallible evidence of everything from your sourcing through to your ESG credentials that you've got for each of your different source operations, whether that be primary or secondary, and really locking in what that information is, particularly things like the origin of the source. So in one instance, from a primary perspective, that's relatively easily, you know where a mine is and you can go visit it physically. From a secondary perspective, it poses more challenges simply because that supply chain, the supply line, is potentially far more complex, going through multiple hands. And so I think from an operational perspective, tracking that and following that and being able to document that is difficult, but being able to do that in a very thorough, comprehensive way, and again, enabling people to view that transparently is critical for that, but it will be a challenge.
Which leads us hopefully perfectly to you, Urs, because we're talking about, I think the phrase was locking in transparency data, and I think the question, I guess, is where is the current market perhaps lacking in locking in that data, gathering the data, locking it in, and how do we avoid almost the inevitable fragmentation that we get in the market with all of these sources in terms of different forms of data coming into the system? So perhaps you can comment on how you see the solution going forward to that transparency, locking in that key data for trust.
Absolutely. And technology can play here an important part, because each of the companies do their work, as Ken just explained, to document its supply chain. But you want to record it in a way that it's available for your next party, means for the buyer. So registering these data on a secure platform in a manner that the data cannot be manipulated by anybody, that helps. So London Market came up with the Gold Bar Integrity Initiative, with the Gold Bar Integrity platform, and that platform is based on blockchain or distributed ledger technology to ensure that the data cannot be manipulated along the value chain. It means all the good work which the refinery did for primary material or secondary material can be locked in and is then available afterwards on a product level further for the investor. I would like to take here a quick reference to what Dean from the Rand Refinery said yesterday. If you know the source, you can trust the value. And I think that very much as well reflects the situation. So you need to trust the source, or you need to know the source, trust the data, what you gathered, and you have to be able to verify this as an investor. Now, how to do this? This is based on transparent and agreed taxonomy, so that everybody knows what type of data would be available. And then you need to be able to verify that on a product level. Means that you have a digital twin for each product, where you get, when you invest into the product, you actually can access that digital twin and you can read the data which had been entered by the responsible refinery, not by somebody else, but by the refinery who did it, who is able to protect its brand. So technology can support each of the players along the value chain to protect their work they did, so that the investor at the end has a full documented, transparent, verifiable product. Give you an example. I have here a gold bar, which is available outside to take away from ABC Refinery. It looks like a gold bar, but it's chocolate. Having that price of the gold bar makes it very attractive to put whatever in the form and shape of a gold bar. So to verify the asset, we can not only trust the brand on it, we need to know what's in it, and we need to know what detailed data on it. And here technology can support.
Thank you. I'm just going to ask you one more question about that, because I think the theoretically that is hopefully clear. But is there some quite? We need to move, I guess, away from traditionally paper and records. And you've already given us an example, and thank you for the chocolate bar. But can you just talk about specific efficiencies in that process that you know, I'm just guessing some people out there may still be using paper. What is the value proposition of that efficiency?
Let's imagine it this way, that everybody of the different companies do a lot of work within the company, and they being able to put it on a common platform so that the other party can actually reuse the data makes it really efficient. So that it's to move from the data from one company to the other in a secure format so that the other party can build on this data. Instead of sending emails with attachments or having paper certificates, you have digital certificates of the products, can be a shipment, can be an individual gold bar, which then can be reused by the other party to continue its work. Imagine this like a birth certificate for each product. At the time of the refinery, whenever they produce the product, it gets a digital twin, and it has now the original product documentation on it. As the bar is walking along the walls, it creates a chain of custody. And that chain of custody is as well visible on that digital certificate. Now, it is not visible the ownership on the certificate. To make it clear, it's all about know your asset, but it's known about chain of custody so that the party buying the product knows exactly what I'm buying. Not only a kilo gold, but what type of gold, when it has been produced, and who actually or where it was before. So I can save a lot of my own compliance work, as I can rely on the compliance work already done and properly documented on an immutable source to avoid any kind of double work.
Ben, does that make sense to you? And is you know, as a refiner, is that the sort of efficiencies that you are either currently implementing or seeking to implement?
Yeah, definitely. And well, I guess firstly, thanks for the plug for the chocolate. If anybody else wants some, there's plenty more to come and take it. But no, definitely. So, you know, again, at ABC, we are using similar tools to what Urs is talking about, and of course, there's a lot of good work that can be done to link them and be able to then share that information across different organisations. And I think that's a critical component of it all, which is drastically lacking, which is the ability to share these different information packets that will substantiate all of the gold products that all of the different refiners and mints are producing out there. So, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's still a major challenge, that data sharing, interoperability, which I can never say, interoperability approach in terms of making sure data flows through the system and through different markets. Talking of different markets, Doris, I'm thinking we're in Singapore. There is, to some extent, a perception, I think, that Asia has been a taker of global standards. That basically global standards have been made in one place and then applied. From your perspective, you're based in China, do you see the region increasingly as a leader in implementing standards, or at least in shaping standards and some of the infrastructure that we've mentioned?
I would say Asia is growing fast. As you know, LBMA has two categories, one member and one is good delivery refiners. In China alone, it has 15 LBMA gold good deliveries refineries and 27 silver refineries. And plus Hong Kong has 2 refineries, both in gold and silver. So China has much more good delivery refineries than any other country. It almost occupies 1/3 of the good delivery list. However, the new challenging coming in 2026 and 2027, the more requirements, disclosure requirements, definitely need them to consider the compliance more deeply. And not only that, but also consider the sustainable consideration in the growing. So in the implementation, I would say the different country has different understanding and also different local regulations. So it will take them some time to do the right work. And LBMA doesn't set the rules afar. And Asia to LBMA is not just a market, it's a partner. LBMA try to set the rules and at the regional level understanding and understand the local government strategies like in Singapore, Hong Kong, China, and all Asian countries, but not lower the global standard. So Asia is a co-creator with LBMA.
Thank you. I like that co-creator model, and I think we need more of it across the sector. Co-creation, sharing, interoperability. As I'm wondering, is there some consideration regarding how the infrastructure can be universally applied? And I'm considering that transition, if you like, from something like good delivery large bars into the kilo bar market, the more typical Asian market. Do we yet have the equipment, if you will, to allow us to start to build that interoperability between markets or to tailor infrastructure for a particular market?
Yeah, that's a very good question because it's a global business, the gold market. And one of the key aspects is that the different markets are using the same taxonomy and are based on the same kind of standards. So technology-wise, the Bullion Integrity Ledger or the GBI program ensures that bar, which actually has been documented from good delivery refiners, they can be then verified by the different markets. So having the same situation here in Singapore, the bar can be verified here based on exactly the same terminology. Now, there's always, here in Asia, it's a special market. It's very much a kilo market. So here, there's much more floating around with the kilo bars going back and forth. Therefore, such a tool to know the chain of custody of the bars, so that it's to know where that bar has been, to avoid that it has to be resent to the refinery to be remelted, makes absolutely sense. So to build that circle of trust within the accredited players of a market like Singapore with the known vaults refiners can be supported by a technical tool to showcase that that bar was within that circle and is therefore a trusted and good delivery bar and doesn't have to be remelted.
Thank you. Talking about remelting, there was a request that we discuss the challenges around the provenance and tracing, if you like, or clear sourcing policies around recycled gold. I know we're running out of time. This is a little short session, but Ben, do you want to just comment on perhaps why recycled gold has generated quite a lot of controversy? I personally have been involved in those discussions over the last few years. So what, from your point of view, are the key due diligence questions that need to be asked around recycled gold?
Yeah, again, it just comes back to the history of that recycled gold. So if you come and talk to me at certain instances, I make no secret to my concern with recycled material, and that comes down to how people place it in terms of definition. So thankfully, with yourself and with Doris and some other well-placed organisations around the world, they're making great headways in terms of defining what recycled metal is, and I think that that's incredibly beneficial to the industry as a whole. But again, it comes down to being able to prove the provenance of that recycled material so that it falls into the correct categories. and not advertising something that it isn't, I think is a critical component of that.
So Doris, I don't know if you also want to comment. You mentioned already that good delivery, responsible goal guidance 10 will be looking to slightly suggest clearer segmentation, if you will, of recycled inputs. Do you want to comment on that quickly before we start to wrap up?
Everybody knows a movie, I think at my generation knows Tomorrow Never Die. And in my opinion, gold never die. Once you recycled, once you melted the recycled gold, it lost the source. So that creates a loophole for some questionable gold into the supply channel. So how to monitor it depends on good delivery refineries. They are real risk control and implementation on their due diligence work. But like LBMA doesn't try to put too much labors or burdens to the refinery. We're trying to promote market transparency. And the easy way in the RGG 10, recasting a good delivery bars into kilobars requires minimum due diligence. Because good delivery bars already go through the process. The old GD, doesn't matter how old they are, maybe 20 years old, but you move out from London Vault and recast it into kilobars, doesn't require much diligence work. However, for recycled bars and the scrap gold, be careful to ask your supplier and supplier. So that's my comments.
I'm aware, again, we're running out of time, so I'm going to ask you for a 1-minute answer to a simple question, I hope, maybe a complex one to answer. For each of you, what is the single most significant gap that is undermining trust in the precious metals industry? Urs, over to you.
Verifiability. So I want to be able to verify whatever has been done. All the players are doing a good work in terms of their compliance assessments, etc. But how do I make sure that my buyers actually can verify that? And I want to have, that's something which the market still is hesitant to trust the technology layer to say, if I put that on that information, I make it available to the public. Doesn't seem that you give up your secrets, but you make it available for those which are interested. For me, transparency is not everybody needs to know everything, but the responsible person to buy a person has access to the important information. So provide enough information to the interested parties will create a better transparency.
Data sharing capability. So again, I think we're in a pretty good position to be able to verify our sourcing and everything like that, but then being able to share that information with other people. As an example, kilo bars, I think it's crazy that we buy our own bars back off a customer and then melt them down to make new kilo bars. That's an absurd waste of energy, and there's absolutely no reason why we should do that when we know the provenance very clearly on bars like that. But again, it's because the information sharing capability isn't there to support that, and I think that's a massive, massive gap.
Thanks, and I think you've heard me say it before, but this sharing, this collaboration, I think this kind of has to happen if we are going to really have a trusted, resilient industry. Doris, if you don't mind, I'll wrap up because we've got 20 or 30 seconds. This was a very compressed session trying to deal with a very key point, which is how do we build trust? We have a question, apparently. Sorry, apologies.
Thanks, John. Thanks, everyone. It was very interesting conversation. And as you know, I'm from Responsible Jewelry Council. I definitely have few interesting questions, specifically not to everyone, but John, to you, and one to Ben. John, at RGC, we are currently exploring how the upcoming shift towards mandatory Scope 3, Scope 3 emission reporting will be impacted downstream manufacturers and retailers. That's what we are right now evaluating. Given that the World Gold Council is heavily influenced on upstream data, what major data gaps you foresee downstream, and how comprehensive framework like RGC co-author the blueprint to bridge this gap between next 24 months or something?
Thank you, and apologize to the rest of you because this wasn't within the scope of this discussion, but I can answer that question hopefully with some detail, in the sense that the question is about Scope 3 emissions, which is basically saying that downstream participants, particularly in the jewelry sector, need to define what Scope 3 emissions are, and for gold that is quite simple. Basically it means that the material, is there an emissions intensity that can be applied to that material, and the short answer is yes, there is. The gold industry actually, this is work I'm deeply involved in, so thank you for the question. The gold industry has very credible, detailed emissions data now, and in fact the World Gold Council this year will be publishing an emissions factor for both newly mined gold and refined gold, or re-refined gold. Recycled gold, perhaps we could call it. So there will be a public emissions factor. You can actually then, if you wish, from a jeweler's point of view, dig a little deeper if you know something about your source. So we may also publish regional emissions factors, which is frankly far more than nearly all other key materials in many manufacturing fabrication processes. So the jewelry industry, when it's seeking to define Scope 3 emissions, the emissions from its materials, its bought goods and services, will have an emissions factor it can use. I hope that answers your question. It wasn't quite the subject matter of this discussion, but nonetheless, when it comes to sustainability, and that's why I made the difference, those are the sort of questions we need to be able to answer. So thank you for the question.
Absolutely.
Sorry.
So Ben, we observe that within our network that when there are refineries like yourself, those who are duly certified with LBMA and RJC, the downstream market acquisition accelerate because it satisfies both risk with compliance and luxury, brand equity. From your perspective and standpoint at ABC, what is the measurable commercial ROI of navigating this combined standards, and how can the industry better scale this blueprint?
Well, I think that could be considered for a long time, to be honest, but I think that there's obviously a lot of similarities between all standards, all guidelines, which is great. Can there be more communication between the bodies to streamline them? Probably. But again, they service sort of different industries. So there's, from an LBMA perspective, it covers barring, minting, etc., jewellery, we're making rings, other jewellery. So I think there's still nuances between the two that will never align, but certainly from a sourcing perspective, for example, it's identical, so the nomenclature should probably be identical, I'd argue, but again, that's a lot of conversations between all of you guys that would have to take place, and I imagine that would take a really long time. So that's an improvement, I guess, that could be considered.
So thank you for that, because that does bring us to something that I am going to mention, which again wasn't in scope, but is the RJC is part of something called the Gold Principles Group. So is the SBMA, so is the LBMA, so is the World Gold Council, so is the World Jewelry Confederation. And the whole point of that group is to try and allow those discussions to actually to flourish, to say what are the baseline expectations of the global industry. And that group also includes the China Gold Association, the DMCC. So you have a forum for that discussion. It is currently chaired by Albert Cheng, so we're very fortunate and privileged. So thank you for that. Again, was not within the scope of this discussion, but there is now a forum to allow us to start to discuss what we call baseline expectations across a bunch of principles on responsible sourcing and sustainability. And I'm fully aware we're out of time, so thank you for your patience. Thank you for my panel. Thank you for